I am joined by a very prestigious panel of security experts here today, so I'll make some introductions rather than have everyone go down rabbit holes. At the end, we've got Professor Benoit Desjardins, Chief Medical Cybersecurity Officer and Professor, practicing doctor and medical imaging specialist at University of Montreal, CHUM. Emeritus professor at UPenn, just up the road, who escaped to Canada last year, was it, Benoit?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, okay. Next, we've got Sharon, who you just heard from. Sharon and I have known each other almost as long as I've known Benoit, I think. So I've been chasing her around states since her days in Florida many years ago. And next to me is Anahi Santiago, CISO of Christiana Care up in Delaware. Another long-serving cybersecurity professional and colleague, and then myself. And I realized I didn't actually introduce myself at the earlier session this morning. I teach at the University of Denver and also UMGC just up the road. I'm also a recovering CISO like Sharon. And finally, I hold a couple of roles in Cylera and other organizations. You can Google any of us. I guarantee you'll get thousands of results back from all four of us. We're going to continue the discussion around cybersecurity and dig into, that I started earlier, and dig in deeply in a couple of areas here. I'd ask that you please hold your questions to the end so that we can get through this. Healthcare can't really escape the growing geopolitical threats as the US wages yet another war in the Gulf, which is depriving China of its oil right now and maybe a flashpoint in the future. While at the same time, obviously the US is loosening ties with NATO, Europe. Putin's invasion of Ukraine has stalled after losing 1.3 million men, and losses are not being replaced enough. This is significant because Putin looks increasingly desperate and paranoid at home and on the international stage. Xi is reportedly becoming more and more upset at the USA and Japan for their support of Taiwan against invasion by China. Both China and Russia have massive armies of cyber warriors, while Iran and the DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, are not far behind their capabilities. Meanwhile, paranoia and distraction extends all the way to this city, where CISA's lost most of its staff, and the FBI has been reportedly gutted of a lot of its cybersecurity investigators. With CNIs, including hospitals, being cyber attacked across Europe and America, we face never before seen challenges. These are, as philosophers would like to say, interesting times, and I think that's probably an understatement. I want to start the questions off with Anahi next to me. The healthcare threat surface is expanding almost weekly, so it seems, with providers adding hundreds of medical and other IoT devices and a deluge of new AI applications, including ambient and agentic AI. As a CISO of a major hospital system, is security able to keep up with changes in the threat surface? And does leadership recognize that by adding high-risk systems, they are changing the balance of security? Anahi.
That's a great question. I think the easy answer is it's very hard to keep up with the emergent changes, not just in the way that healthcare organizations want to use technology, but in the way that the threat actors are exploiting those technologies. But I think any successful CISO is one that has a seat at the table and maintains that seat at the table in such a way that one can anticipate what the strategies are of the organization and plan accordingly. And so I use the example of Christiana Care, who looks at their strategic plan in such a way that we plan for 5 years out so that we can be who we need to be 8 years from now. And so that gives me a fairly decent runway to be able to prepare a security program that's aligned with things like aggressive hospital at home programs, aggressive virtual care. We're already looking at the potential of remote surgeries via the use of 5G technology, and so I'm crafting a program that is already in the thick of quantum and AI and so on and so forth. But that doesn't change the fact that I can't remember what you said, but something to the effect of 30 seconds from now, we're already...
We don't live in the same world we lived in 30 seconds.
Exactly, and that's really fair, and especially now with Mythos and everything that we're learning, it's challenging, but there are ways to at least keep pace, and certainly ways to not necessarily fall behind.
Right. Rebuttal, Sharon, Benoit?
I don't have any rebuttal to that. I mean, I live it every single day in what I do. And so we added last month alone almost 5,000 IOCs to our SIM just to monitor. And that's what we know about. That's already known threats. That doesn't address the ones that are there. So that's the kind of volume world we're living in now. As far as a security, as operating security.
It's certainly very dynamic, right?
Yes.
The threat surface is dynamic. The assets on our network are dynamic. The applications in our data centers and in the cloud are dynamic, and it makes it a greater challenge than ever before to keep up with these things.
You know, I share a statistic for our own organization that I have 90,000 IP addresses on my network. 70,000 of those are medical devices or IoT, so things that are very, very difficult to manage. So think about the percentage of Windows standard workstations that I can manage versus the tens of thousands of devices that I have to somehow creatively figure out how to contain.
And your IT team don't manage your medical devices?
No, they do not.
No. Who manages them?
Clinical engineering with a lot of support from information security.
And do clinical engineering know how to spell cybersecurity?
They actually do. So we have a very robust training program for a clinical engineering team. And then I have an in-plant in clinical engineering that is a cybersecurity medical MIOT member of my team that lives in clinical engineering. So it's a model that has worked as best as it can work.
So cross-collaboration between teams
really
is important and growing in importance, right? So we've got a professor of radiological medicine here. You know, what challenges are you seeing around medical devices, right? Medical imaging.
Well, there's so many medical devices in hospitals, essentially. Like where I was at Penn for 16 years, we had hundreds of radiology devices. We had thousands of devices across the hospital. We had injection devices that were all networked that were administering medication. We had devices coming in and out of the system, mainly for some kind of vendors' devices temporarily hooking up to the system to run an experiment or something like that. That's what happens in academic medical centers. I was involved even, in some experiments like AI in advanced software for an MRI scanner and stuff like that, where at night we scanned the pig, and then essentially a major company came in, hooked their system on the network. And that really, they were able to do that, but they could have brought in, some basically malware, and then that could have spread throughout the hospital. So it's a big problem to just keep track of those devices, because they just it's not just a fixed set of devices, and more there are Internet of Things that are hooked up to the hospital from all over the place. It's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So Sharon, medical devices are growing at 18% per annum compound globally, right?
Yes.
How do you keep up with what's connected to your network?
Scan, and more scans. We do have an intake system by which, they, have to go through a review, cybersecurity review for all new devices that come on the network. That tells us a lot. But, those devices rotate very rapidly. you know,
RMAs,
different models.
yeah.
You have different models of them. You have, so, you know, we use a very commonly used product called XDome in our environment to specifically scan. We, of course, segment our medical devices as much as possible. You can never, I think, really segment all of your IoT into one place, but at least your medical devices you can segment off, or have radiology on a network, pharmacy on a network, lab on a network, and do that. And so that helps us identify when we have a rogue medical device show up that's not, you know, identified on that particular network. So I would say we do a fairly good job at it, but it's a problem with some of those devices that live within our ecosystem. Healthcare organizations are infamous for having to use something till the wheels fall off of it.
Oh, yeah.
And so we have a lot of legacy, and I won't name, it's not CHOP, just to let you know, but I won't name the healthcare system. But I experienced an incident where we identified a Windows 7 laptop in a lab that was hooked up to a blood monitor that ran a test that cost $1,400 a test. And they ran that thing 24/7 doing these tests for all other hospitals around the area because they were one of the only ones. And it was a high revenue generating, and they had a fit when I said, you need to shut that down. Because one, it was very important to clinical care. Two, it was revenue generating for the hospital, and it was, you know, something that they needed. And so as a result of that, you know, when you identify those legacy things in your environment, having to deal with them can be a long, drawn out, very manual process.
And I presume the system had never been patched since birth.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it had been patched probably to the point that you could stop, that when they stopped patching Windows 7, and then no, after that it didn't get patched ever again.
Yeah.
And they just kept running it.
Yeah. There's quite a few of those systems in my experience.
Yes.
Some even running Windows 2000.
Yeah.
Like still employed in a
Yeah.
clinical capacity because the application was never updated to run on anything newer, right?
Yeah.
So asset inventory,
Yeah.
segmentation, do you get down into micro-segmentation, ports and protocols?
We haven't yet gotten to microsegmentation. Microsegmentation requires a level of knowledge and understanding of how the systems connect, what information passes. That is a very complex
Right.
thing. It's like having firewalls between, you know, your perimeter firewall that, you know, and then you've got your application firewall, and then you've got your database firewall, and making sure all of those talk to each other seamlessly and not allow the right traffic to pass through. That's a very complicated, and you've got to map that.
You've got to build profiles for every one of those medical device types to understand what is legitimate traffic
Yes.
and then what's illegitimate traffic. And as you said earlier, right, it's dynamic, right?
It is.
Yeah. I want to expand this question onto AI, to our resident AI expert up here. Benoit, you know, everyone's talking about AI this month. Everyone's been talking about it for the last 2 years. It's, you know, the new panacea, the new everything, right? The new calamity, if you read some of the press out there. It's the elephant in the room, right? Let's talk about mythos, right? And also some of the work that the Google Threat Intelligence Group has been doing. Tell us about what these new systems are and how everyone, including our Teflon president, is worried about them, right?
So I think this year really is the turning point in the application of AI in cybersecurity. I think with the advent of Mythos, it's a whole new ballgame out there. Okay, Mythos is a new model by Anthropic. It's part of Claude. Okay, it's Claude Mythos, and it's a general model. Okay, it's not like a cybersecurity super specialist model. It's just a general purpose model. It just happened to be a super specialist in cybersecurity that can easily find vulnerabilities, that can build immediately, you know, exploits to exploit those vulnerabilities, and that can run campaigns immediately. And it has discovered thousands of zero-day exploits in operating systems and in web browsers. And some vulnerabilities were, you know, as old as 30 years old in the code. And for example, in Firefox, it found 271 zero-day exploits. So this is pretty crazy. And this was just announced, like, the Mythos was just announced, like, a little bit over a month ago, so early April. And it's been a lot of change since then. Now, yesterday, essentially, we found out there was a report by the Google Threat Intelligence Group that they had documented their first AI-assisted zero-day exploit campaign. And so it was like kind of a 2FA bypass flaw that was exploited on some kind of open source administrative software that was not named, so we don't quite know what it is. I'm sure it's going to be named at some point. And fortunately, they were able to stop that campaign before, the hell broke loose, but they got lucky this time. It's not going to happen all the time. Now, AI has been around for a long time, and has been a hot topic for the last couple of years, and now it's becoming a really hot topic in cybersecurity. AI does a couple of things, One of the things AI does is that it makes non-experts become experts. And that's not only in cybersecurity, that's in every single field, okay? Now, in cybersecurity, we have a great example. I mean, 3 months ago in February, there was a case of a Russian actor who was able to compromise 2,516 FortiGate devices. And he did that across 106 countries. And it didn't use there was no zero-day vulnerability that was exploited. Basically, he just used 2 AI-based software, DeepSeek to be able to plan attacks, as well as Claude to be able to generate exploits. And essentially, he just ran the whole thing. I mean, this was not an expert. He just ran the whole thing. It was great to find vulnerability, to find basic flaws about access, about unprotected access, about reused password or weak passwords, etc. But essentially, this non-expert did a lot of damage, thousands of devices over many countries. And the second thing that AI does is that it brings speed, massive superhuman speed, okay? It makes attacks super fast. Now, just this morning, basically, there's new numbers comparing the speed of attacks versus speed of defenders. And I'm gonna read those. Essentially, right now, these days, we're dealing with, when you generate an AI-based script, at 0 seconds, you generate the script. And then after that, it takes about, 5 seconds for a CVE to be exploited. And after that, it takes 20 seconds to bypass the MFA. And after 30 seconds, a shell is dropped. And then after 45 seconds, all the credentials are dumped. And then after, 73 seconds, basically, there's full compromise of the system. So 73 seconds, okay? On the other side, defense, latest numbers. Well, the SIEM will basically capture that information. It's going to take about a minute. And then after that, it's going to be kind of a tier 1 triage. It's going to take 5 minutes. And then there's going to be, once the threat is identified, there's going to be a priority ticket issued in an hour. And then after that, there's going to be a patch issued, if lucky, in the first 24 hours. By the time the ticket is issued, that system, okay, will have attacked 500 other institutions. So this is the kind of massive difference in speed. And one of the problems with AI, I mean, you might have heard about Mythos, that because of its power, it was restricted to, the access was restricted to just a couple of companies. Its power is called, the Project Glasswing. And so it was, basically given to the big ones, Apple, Microsoft, Google, et cetera, so that they could fix their system before the system was made public, so that they could, bad guys could find all the vulnerabilities. But even if bad guys don't have access to Mythos right now, one of the problems is as follows. There's a bunch of other software that are AI-based that are less performant than Mythos. And they can do a lot of the work, even if they're not as good as finding vulnerabilities. One of the things they can do is as follow. You are all aware that every Tuesday there's like, the Microsoft patch release. Every couple of Tuesdays, Microsoft patch release that fixes the flaws. And these days, the latest patches, I've found a lot of flaws and fixed a lot of flaws. Well, AI software can take that patch, that system that's been submitted by Microsoft, can reverse engineer it, and then basically can identify all the flaws that are to be patched by this patch, and then generate exploits from this patch within like seconds of getting access to the patch, and then start running campaigns within seconds of having generated that vulnerability. So as soon as Microsoft issues a patch, essentially, even if all these bad guys don't have access to Mythos, they have access to software that can reverse engineering that patch and create immediately, large campaigns exploiting these vulnerabilities across the world. This is the new reality, and over the next year or two, what we're going to see is a bunch of companies using AI software to find their vulnerabilities, fix them as fast as possible, while at the same time, cyber attacks will be raining on them. And it's going to be a bad year or two, but we're going to have to go through that process.
So nothing to worry about then? No Skynet just yet?
Well, he just articulated my worst nightmare. I mean, that is why I don't sleep at night. And I think that the problem in health, one of the problems in healthcare is patching systems is a critical thing for us, patching medical device systems, patching our own systems that are connected to medical devices, or, we can disrupt an entire ecosystem in our lab or in our pharmacy by just simply deploying a patch in our environment.
And
So
you can't do that
automating-
on a critical system that's keeping a patient alive,
Well,
right?
I mean, you might have to, right? Like, I'm actually, I have to leave this afternoon. At 1 o'clock, I have an AI governance steer committee. And then at 2, I'm actually presenting this to the board. We have to change our methodology, not only for how we mitigate vulnerabilities and respond faster, but also our risk management vulnerability. We've always erred on the side of caution. We're not going to patch a system because it might break things. The reality, given the speed that Benoit just referenced, the riskier thing might be to patch and take the downtime. And so in my presentation to the board this afternoon is we've got to change the way we do things, because it's not only, traditionally we've patched critical vulnerabilities and have tested. What Mythos has demonstrated is that you can take 2 low-risk vulnerabilities that have traditionally just been ignored and link them to create a critical exploit. And so we have to really start to socialize that multiple frequent downtimes, which is something we've always avoided in healthcare, might be the better solution than just testing and erring on the side of caution. And that's a really scary proposition, but it's one that my executive management and leadership needs to understand as we begin to shift, because I don't want it to be 1 to 2 years of awful pain. I feel like we really need to get ahead of this faster. I think it will be 1 to 2 years, but I don't want it to be.
And it's building resilience into that I think is, it's when you patch and you have a downtime that's unanticipated, how do you recover from that as quickly as possible, get them back up and running? That's why resilience is so important in the ecosystem now, as we go from this Windows-based, and I don't mean Microsoft Windows, I mean a patching window-based patching methodology where you only patch in this time frame, to more of a continuous automated patching model.
Right. Do we need additional infrastructure to support that? An N+2, N+3 model, so that we can take out a single MRI and patch it and still have capability to treat patients with a second MRI or a second device of some
Expensive
sort?
proposition.
It's very expensive.
And-
MRIs are not cheap.
Yeah, at a time
We got a
where-
few vendors here. We'd love to sell you one if you happen to be in the market for an MRI.
But I think
So-
it's evaluating the criticality of that and the possible impacts to that. You know, you've got to identify those things that are absolutely critical to your infrastructure and to your clinical care continuum. And then you evaluate that, and maybe it's not only maybe not having one there, but making sure that those downtime procedures that they have, if that thing goes off the network, that they know exactly what to do, and that you exercise that with them on a regular basis, so that they know exactly what to do. It's muscle.
Do we need to be moving more towards split technology solutions for medical treatment? So we've got Siemens here, we've got Samsung here, we've got Philips here at the show today. Some of the folks I've met. Do we need to be having one of each of those technologies in place so that when a patch is made or a vulnerability is discovered in one particular technology stack, we can take that out, test it properly, as Anahi said, right, without impacting patient workflows?
But this is where the interoperability causes you a problem, because connecting a Siemens device and connecting a Philips device in interoperability is not necessarily the same. They don't use the same API keys. They don't use the same, there's that. And we are so, there was such a push for hospitals to become these interoperable, environments, that now we've built this spider web of things that if you go in there, it's like paying pickup sticks, and if you pull the wrong one out,
But
part of it's
we have
gonna-
technology stacks that are dependent on one or two technology vendors, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would happen if Epic were taken down, right? That's an extreme example, but you can take that to any of the components that make up
Yeah.
the HIT or HIOT networks in our hospitals today.
I think there's an argument to be made for the opposite, which is a move towards application rationalization so that you are not playing whack-a-mole with
That's the other side, yeah.
multiple systems. So
Yeah.
in order to be able to effectively move at the speed and reduce the vulnerabilities, you have to look at less systems on which to have to address. So what I'm sharing with my board is a recommendation for rationalization, not additional tech sprawl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I want to come back to Mythos. Mythos right now is only available to some of the big companies, right? The big banks, for example. I had dinner with a number of CISOs in the financial services sector a couple of weeks ago, and they were just exasperated with the number of vulnerabilities that they were able to find in their stacks. And this is, financial services is the rich big brother to all other industries across the country. So you can imagine we get the scraps in healthcare, they get the prime red meat, right? Sorry to offend vegetarians in the audience, but I mean they get the prime cuts here, right? If the banks rather are finding hundreds and hundreds of vulnerabilities in their code, what's the situation for healthcare? And do we stand a chance?
Healthcare doesn't, out of the 50 companies that are part of Project Glasswing, no healthcare
Yes.
companies are included.
I'm glad you mentioned that, yeah.
It's not even an Epic.
Yes.
And I had a conversation with Epic about this, and their answer was was not an answer. But basically, I have a concern, and through the Healthcare Sector Coordinating Council and Health ISAC, we're trying to push for the inclusion of healthcare, given just the unique nature of how we operate. But to date, we have not been successful.
Right. If we were to get some healthcare entities included in Project Glasswing, right? What would you expect to find given the proliferation of systems we have here, and would it make any difference to your ability to make those systems whole, to patch vulnerabilities? Do you have the capability, capacity, resources in order to make a difference, or would it just be more things to keep you up at night?
I think it would be cost reallocation. And I do anticipate, and again, this is part of the conversation I'm having with our board, is we're going to have to invest differently. Healthcare margins are shrinking. My organization used to enjoy a 10% margin. It no longer does. And so to suggest that we're just going to throw more money at it implies that that money's coming from somewhere else.
Right.
And that might be, a decision on investing in cybersecurity differently and investing less in some clinical capability. But those are the hard questions that we have to solve. But we need the data. And if we have no healthcare representation, then it's all FUD. It's not, but we need the data to be able to go to leadership and demonstrate what it is that we need to do, and we just don't have it yet.
And I think it's going to require also a much tighter collaboration between your traditional IT infrastructure teams, particularly your networking teams, that apply segmentation, because there's going to be a balance of this in the way you architect your ecosystem. And it's like a general looking at a battle strategy for a certain, a geographic area that he's responsible for protecting and defending, and even being offensive when necessary. And I think that's one of the things that healthcare has traditionally not been from a cybersecurity perspective, is we are not an offensive, we are a defensive, we're not even counter-offensive. And so I think we're gonna have to look at those strategies differently now with this AI coming at us, that we can be, in some cases, a more automated offensive than just defensive, or even counter-offensive once attacked, that we can implement those strategies. So I think it's going to be a rework and a re-architecture of the way we view this whole ecosystem now.
One of the big difference between banks and hospitals is that a bank will typically offer less different kinds of services than a hospital. So they'll have like just a couple of IT software, and they can run, Mythos on these software to find all the bugs. And typically there will be software from big companies, and they can fix that. In a hospital, you will have typically over 1,000 different software from different vendors, because there's a zillion different departments in hospitals, and then there's software for clinical purposes, there's software for administrative purposes, and many of these software will be from big companies that have the resources to patch them using the latest AI software. But a lot of these software come from much smaller company, like, mom and pop shops that have design one product, and then they have a couple of programmers. They just don't have the resources. Some of these companies could be actually defunct. You're still using a software from a defunct company that has actually no way of patching the vulnerabilities. So the only thing you can do is that you can patch. It runs on Windows, for example. You hope that it's going to run on the latest Windows, and then patch the vulnerabilities on Windows per se, but you won't be able to patch the vulnerabilities from that little software. And so this is a much more difficult task for hospital than for banks, because of the diversity and the number of vendors and software that we have in hospitals.
I think there's one other point. In healthcare, it's difficult to calculate an ROI. In financial services, if you're about to lose $1 million because of fraudulent bank transactions, that ROI of security is immediately apparent and immediately justifiable.
Yes.
We haven't put the price yet on the cost of a patient life, right?
Yeah.
We don't have a figure for it. We don't have a figure for patient morbidity, mortality, or patient harm, right?
Yeah. And I think you can't discount the fact that any hospital is 50 businesses running under one umbrella. Yes. My hospital is a hotel. It is a food service.
It's a very expensive food service.
It's a very expensive food service. And it is a retail food service. It is a pharmacy. It is a retail pharmacy. It is a gift shop. It is, it is a cleaning service. It is, it's a power plant. It's a fire station.
It's a parking lot.
Sometimes, because if you're a level 1 trauma center, you're also air flight control.
Yep.
So you really have to think about the software and the each one of those individual businesses needs its own individual sort of micro ecosystem to run. Every one of those softwares is unique. It's specific, purpose-built for that particular business running in that hospital. And that is why it is so complex to.
And that's why the smart
address.
people like us are running it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to open the floor to questions. I think Gail and maybe Kylie too are running around with microphones. But if you've got a question, raise your hand, and one of our great folks here will come out and hand you a mic. While we're waiting for brave people to ask questions, we got one over here. So I was going to say, while we're waiting, is AI going to transform patient outcomes, do you think?
It's already transforming patient outcome, basically. I mean, AI can do things that radiologists can't do right now. I mean, it has a couple of impacts in two areas. One of them is that it can detect disease earlier in different ways. Okay, for example, there's AI software that's out there right now, relatively new, that can detect on CT, evidence of pancreatic cancer in a way that's not obvious to radiologists. And they did that by looking at patients who develop pancreatic cancer later on and going back on the prior CTs and trying to look at the radiomics of essentially the pancreas and to try to identify early markers that are not visible to radiologists. So that's one way that AI can help. Another way is that AI can detect stuff much faster before the radiologist can read the exam, and that's something implemented whenever you have a patient undergoing a CT scan of the head for a stroke, okay? The old way of doing that is that a patient underwent the CT, and then when the exam is finished, the images were sent to the radiologist for interpretation. Now you got AI software running on the scanner, and as the individual images get acquired and generated, if the AI software, which analyzes each image as it is generated, detects a stroke, then it will immediately send a message to the stroke team saying, hey, we have a stroke, the patient is still on the scanner, but come here, get him, because he's going to need, anticoagulation therapy or clot-busting medication to deal with that. So that's one way that AI helps a lot. Another way is to, help deal with the volume, to prioritize cases. I mean, we have the volume in radiology increases by about 5% every year, the volume of images to read or studies to read, whereas the number of radiologists increases by 0.4% every year. So we need help to compensate for this discrepancy. And so AI is there to be able to help with that and help prioritize the studies, because if it can read about, say we have a backlog of 1,000 CTs to read, well, you can run AI on that backlog and say, find me studies that have important features like a pulmonary embolus, incidentally, or new cancer or whatever, and just flag it and put it on the top of the list so that the radiologist can look at it as soon as possible because it's an emergency. This stuff exists already, and it helps medicine a lot in terms of...
So the benefits are worth the pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to thank our wonderful panel for stepping out from their the clinical and managerial roles, to Benoit, to Sharon, to Inaki, and thank you all, and I think we are going to lunch. Is that the plan?